Okay, welcome to the next video for session 6. So what we want to do is to display the form to the user so that they have a chance to fill in the form. Okay. All right, so let's think about that. We know the user will go to /area-calculator. So when they hit enter, we should see the form pop up. So right away, we know that we need to somehow read in the form. And if you recall, we can read in the template using the parse files and the execute function. So let's do that. So we're going to say ts underscore, and we're going to say template that parse files, and the file will be found on that /ui/html/ and we need to name the file, which is input.area.page.tmpl. Okay, input.area.page.tmpl. Okay, and then we need to actually do the execution. ts.execute, and we're going to pass in the response writer, and since we're not sending anything into the template, we just say nil. Okay, now this is only the beginning, okay, because when the form is loaded, right, when the user hits the /area.calculator URL path, that is a GET request, right? And you know that whenever you request a page, that is a GET request. Now, when the user types in the values and hits submit, that's going to be a POST request, right? So how do we know if the user is requesting the page or if the user has already filled in the data on the values on the page and is now submitting? In other words, how do we know it's a GET versus a POST for this URL path? All right. Well, lucky for us that Go allows us to check to see when we hit a URL, whether we are just getting the form or we are actually posting it. And we will simply use the R, right? So finally we're using the R. So we're going to say if r.method is the get method, then I know that the user is asking for the form. And so we will present the form to them. Now, in Go, you always have to put the else when you close the if. So you can't put the else on the next line. It will give you an error. Okay, so it always has to be right after the if. Okay, so if it's not a get, then it means it must be a post. So if it's a post, then what we want to do is to send the user to the path where we will display the answers. Okay, and how do we do that? We do that with a redirect. Okay, a redirect. Oops, redirect. And a redirect requires we use the W, requires that we use the R, so it's telling me right here. And we need to specify which path we should send the user to. Well, we want them to go to the path area dash calculator dash 2. And this is the important part. What kind of redirect is this? There are different types of redirect, and I'll discuss that towards the end. I want this to be http status, okay, temporary, oops, http status temporary, status temporary redirect. Okay, so we have our redirect. Okay, and so what will happen when the user hits the submit button? It will cause the else portion, which is the post, to happen. So what will this code do? It will push the user to this new page, this new path. Okay, and that's it for this. Now most of the work will get done in the actual calculate area handler, which is called when we hit this path. Remember that. So when you get this path, notice the user does not explicitly put in this path. We send them there. And as far as the browser is concerned, it was as if the user typed it in themselves. So it will do the same thing. It will simply call the handler associated with it. And that's calculate area. So we now have to actually do the calculation. Okay. Now, the first thing we need to keep in mind, all right, we need to send 3 pieces of data to the template. One for length, one for width, one for area. So in Go, and this is standard, we always do this. Go does not have classes and objects and all of that, right? So the idea of inheritance and all of that, those are not a part of Go. They were intentionally left out. Classes were intentionally left out because they complicate things. Okay, so it means that once you learn certain patterns in Go, you keep using those same patterns to solve similar problems. So when we want to send multiple pieces of data to a template, we use a struct. Okay, so sending multiple pieces of data using a struct. And the only analogy is a struct is almost like a class. Okay, so we're gonna say type, that's the keyword, and we're gonna give the struct a name. Let's call it user. Notice I'm using capital letter, user data. Okay, and then I'm gonna simply say it's a struct. Okay, now what I put inside is simply the pieces of data that this struct will save? Well, I want it to keep track of the length. Okay, space. What data type is length? Length is a float. Okay, float 64. What else do I want this struct to hold? I want it to hold the width. Okay, and it is also a float. And finally, we want it to hold the area. Now, the reason why I'm using capital letters is because if you want another file to be able to see these variables in Go, you have to make them begin with a capital letter. In other words, we say that they're exportable. So whenever you see variables having big letters, it means that those variables can be accessed from other files. Keep that in mind. Okay. All right. So now we have our struct called user data, which will hold 3 pieces of data. Each of them will be of type float 64. All right. So going forward now, we can create as many of these user data as we want. Okay, great. So the next thing now, I need to get the length and the width from where? From the form. Okay, so when the user hits submit, Go, the web server, the request object will have the value for length and will have the value for width. Because remember, when we created the form, we said that the first box will be called length, the second box will be called width. So we're going to use that now. So the first thing we have to do is to tell Go, okay, Go, I want to get the values from the form. And so we're going to say r.parse form. And that will tell Go, okay, you need to go get those values from me, Go. All right. So now let's save values. Okay. And to save the values, we're going to have, of course, a length. Remember, the values are strings, right? They're strings. So we're going to say r.post form. Now, that get length. Okay, so what is really happening here? Well, when Go parses the values, it creates a map, right? And a map simply says, okay, this is the name and this is the value. So it's a name value pair. So when I say get me the value which is associated with the name length, it will give me the value. And I will save it in a variable called length. Likewise, I will ask it to give me the value that is associated with the name width. Remember, I'm getting these names from the names I used in the form, length, width. Okay. So now I have the values from the form. Excellent. Now I need to multiply them and save them in a variable called area. Now, right away, so calculate the area. Obviously, it would be nice if I said length times width, but as you know, length is a string, width is a string, so I can't multiply two strings. So I'll have to convert length and width to float. Okay. So to do that, Go has a package and that package is named STUV. Okay, comes here. It's named S string con v. Okay, so it's str and conv. Okay, string convert. Okay, so by the way, I'm not just grabbing these things out of thin air. I always use documentation. Okay, so for example, I come here and I say go docs strconv. Okay, this is a package, and what I like about the Go documentation, it's so easy to follow. They give you ample examples. So for example, you can do, it has all of this. You can do whatever, A to I. What we want is to convert from string to a float. Okay, and then so we could say, okay, what is this one? Parse float. Okay, parse float. Right? So if we come down here, okay, parse float, it says parse float converts the string to a floating point number, which is exactly what we want. So it takes a string and we have to tell it what size of float, 32-bit or 64-bit. Normally we say 64-bit. See? And it gives us an example. Right? This is a string. We want it to be 32-bit when it's done. And it tells us that if there was any error during the conversion, meaning it could not convert, it sends back the error. So in addition to sending back the answer, it sends back if there was any error. Okay. So documentation for Go, Go is the only language that I have found the documentation to be simple and intuitive. And I have looked at a lot of documentation. All right, so let's do the conversion now. All right, so I will simply say length of rectangle will be, okay, I'll ignore the error for now, so I'll put an underscore. Okay. So in other words, the underscore means if there's an error returned, I don't care about it. Okay, that's not what you normally do, but I do not want to add error checking to our code right now. Okay, that will add another layer of difficulty, which I do not want to deal with right now. Okay, so we're going to say strconv that parse float, and it expects a string, which is length, and it expects 32 or 64. I'm going to use 64. Likewise, we're going to say the width of rectangle str dot parse float. I'm going to give it width, and again we're going to give it 64. Okay, so we have our length and width converted to a float, and so now we can just do our calculation. Area of rectangle will be shorthand notation, length rectangle times width rectangle. Okay, and there we have our answer. So what's the last step? Let's create, and I'm going to use object-oriented terminology. Create an instance of the user data struct. Okay, so we're gonna create a struct and we're gonna populate it. I'm gonna call it data. Okay, so data is of type user data, which is a struct. And so what must we give this struct? We must give it 3 pieces of data: the length, the width, and the area, which we have. Length, comma, width, comma, and area. And we must always put a comma after. Okay? Okay, so the easy part now, we'll simply call the template engine. That's it. And we'll just simply say ts, comma underscore, okay, template, parse files, and we want the file to be, that is to be parsed to be dot /UI /HTML /display dot area dot page dot tmpl. All right, so once that's parsed and ready, we can simply say ts dot execute, where it will execute and merge the template with the data. So we give it w and we give it data. So notice data is no longer 1 piece of data, it's 3 pieces of data. But since we cannot pass all 3 of them, right? So we can't say length of rectangle, comma, width of rectangle, comma, area of rectangle, comma. No, you can only pass 1 thing. And so we create this object, this struct, which has all the data we need, and we simply pass that. Because as far as Go is concerned, this is just 1 thing. Okay, so there we have it. Now, the moment of truth. Does it work? So let's open up our terminal, and we're going to say that /cmd /web. Okay, and then of course we need to say go run. Okay, no errors. That doesn't normally happen, of course, right? When we write code, we usually make errors. That's something that's a part of life as a programmer. Okay, so let's do localhost, not resource, but localhost. Does that still work? Still works. Does static still work? Still works. So let's start testing our new URL paths. Area dash calculator. All right, good. Our form is here. Let's put in some values. 4, 5, and let's submit. When you click submit, it should take us to a new URL. Okay, this should change. Let's see. Submit. All right, takes us to a new URL, and we have 4, 5, 20, 4, 5, 20, 4, 5, 20. Okay, so obviously we have a problem. These curly braces shouldn't be here. It seems that it's putting in all the values. All right, so where? Yeah, it's putting in everything. We don't want that. So let's go back. Let's investigate. Okay. So if we only have a dot, it will put in everything it finds in the struct. Here, I want it to only display the length, and that's why we had to use capital letters. Because now, length is easily found. So what this template will do is to go and get the value for length. Okay, capital L. Okay. Here we want to put width. Okay. And once again, the reason why it knows about these values is because we made them capital letters when we were creating the struct here. Okay. So if we want the values of a struct to be seen outside the file, we make them capital letters. In fact, that applies to Go. If you want some variable or some function to be seen from some other file, make it a capital letter. Normally, functions are small letter, but if I ever see a capital letter for a function, it means that I could call it from somewhere else outside the file. Okay, so I have now said that what I want. Remember, the dot needs to be right beside the name. It cannot have a space. It has to be right beside it. Okay. Okay, so let's restart our server. And let's try again. Let's go back, powered, put in another value, say 2, submit. Okay, so 2, 5, 10. And if I click here, that works. Of course, that should work. Okay, so we have successfully created a page flow where the user wanting a service is able to use that service. And that service is simply the ability to find the area of a rectangle. All right? Okay, so I will leave it here for this video. And in the next video, I want us to extend this area here a little bit. Right? What I want to do is to ask the user if they want to try again. Right? Do you want to enter? You want to find another area, right? And then also I want to discuss a bit more about the redirect. Okay. All right. I'll see you in the next video.